Good morning for those that are in WA, and good afternoon for those that are in the East Coast. And I hope you have a sunny day like we do here in WA. And welcome to this Thursday session. Today's session is on writing strategies for PhD students and scholars in general, and how to run an effective writing group. My name is Bernardo. Dewey. I am a PhD student at the University of Western Australia, and I'm a member of the TASA Postgraduate group. Uh, Before we start, I would like to do a bit of an acknowledgement of country, and to then jump to some housekeeping. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Whadjuk people. I wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region, and the other different people around different states, which I don't know their names, but I would like to acknowledge that as well. This is a very special month because as every year on the 26th of May, we have National Sorry Day that remembers and acknowledges the mistreatment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people who were forcibly removed from their families and communities. So, which they are known as the stolen generation. So it's good to acknowledge that and try to join some of the events if possible. And in regards to housekeeping, I want to highlight that this session is being recorded. And in regards to the session will be divided in three different parts. We will have 15 minutes where both of our panelists that I will introduce in a minute will be presenting some of the writing groups that they currently run. And then we will have about 20 minutes to ask them some specific questions about these writing groups. And we will leave some time for you to ask some questions at the end. I really want to encourage everyone to write comments, write questions. And also, if Dorinda or you, Lara, wants to share any documents or have any specific resources that you would like to share, you can let us know, and people can write their emails, or we can organize the way for you to get those resources to them. Saying that, I would like to introduce the two great panelists we have today. Dr. Lara Mckenzie, who is a research fellow in the School of Social Sciences at the University of Western Australia, and an honorary research fellow in anthropology at Macquarie University. Her research focuses on Australia, particularly on gender, age, love, kinship, family, and reproduction, as well as inequality and precarity in higher education. Lara recently finished a study on recent family precarity and audit practices. She's currently working on a project on COVID-19 and vaccination. So thank you very much, Lara, for joining us today. And then we have Dorinda, who is a PhD candidate at the School of Social Sciences at the University of Western Australia, nearing the completion of her thesis. Her research project is a qualitative interview-based examination of post-abortion stories shared by birth women. This project examines the exercise of agency by autonomous women towards an abortion decision, examining the process of making a personal decision within a social context. Her research interest lies in qualitative methodology, including research ethics within sensitive research. She also has research interest in those things that impact women and families more broadly, as well as rural communities and social theory. Dorinda is currently the TASA Postgraduate Portfolio Leader. So welcome, Dorinda, again, and thank you for being part of this panel. I would like to start asking you, okay, so we're going to start with the first part of this panel today. So I'm aware that both of you are running great writing groups at the moment. So I would like to ask you in regards to these writing groups to do a general description of what you're doing, when you started, and also just tell us about these different type of writing groups. So I would like to start with you, Lara. So if you can tell us a bit more about them.
Sure. So I have a few different ones. I've been involved in either as an organizer or a participant over the years. So I might just go through a few of them. So the first one is, I guess, one that's kind of based in my institution, the University of Western Australia, which I was originally kind of joined as, I think it was just after I finished my PhD, but I'm pretty sure it's been going for about nearly a decade now, and started, as far as I know, by my colleague and friend Laura Dales, we're both organising it together at the moment. And it's changed a bit with COVID, but generally kind of face-to-face, runs for the entire day, every kind of month on Fridays, sometimes more often depending on everyone's schedule. Kind of longer writing sessions. We're all kind of in this room together that you can actually lock and has like a kitchen and all that kind of nice stuff. So kind of 1 to 1.5 hour sessions, and then like longer breaks where we try and kind of get up and talk and go and actually have lunch together, that kind of stuff. So it's quite social, and the like kind of longer sessions I think work quite well because it's face to face and you can kind of hear other people around you working. With COVID, actually after that, so Laura went on maternity leave and me and another person kind of took over running it for a while. Then Laura came back and now we're sort of co-organising it together. And since COVID, we've needed to move stuff online a bit more. So we've sort of changed a little bit in terms of the structure and done kind of shorter sessions some of the time, or tried to kind of decide whether or not it's good to use the camera on, just so you kind of feel other people being around working, even if it's not, really the same. And, taking kind of shared breaks, but then there's obviously the sort of issue where you're not getting up from your computer for like half a day to a day because you're sitting there talking or working. So there's those sorts of things to negotiate. And other than that, the other kind of main one I've been involved in recently is an international one, and I found it quite early on in the pandemic. I was kind of looking around for writing groups to be involved in online because I was, working from home, and I don't work well when it's just me. Like I need colleagues to talk to. So I kind of experimented with a few different things and then came across this writing group through Facebook because a bunch of anthropologists were in it for some reason. That I think it had been advertised in some anthropology group, so it's still hugely weighted towards anthropologists. And started kind of going along to the sessions. It's basically kind of people from all around the world. It's kind of gone up and down a little bit, like participation wise. I think quite early on in the pandemic, it was very popular because everyone was working from home. There's a lot of people from, not very many from Australia actually, but a lot of people from across Southeast Asia and South Africa and across kind of Europe, especially kind of Western Northern Europe, UK and the US, who I never get to see because it's 12-hour time difference. And the way it's structured is initially it was just one person who was organising it and pretty much running sessions 24 hours a day. And they would be kind of shorter sessions. It's changed a little bit, but at the moment it's a kind of 50-minute writing, 5 to 10-minute break where you kind of all pop out and have a chat for 4-hour sessions, and they will just kind of get lumped together. So someone will host 4 hours, someone else will host 4 hours, or someone will split it, that kind of stuff. So initially I was going as a participant, and then they were looking for people to run sessions, and especially because no one really wants to run the 5 a.m. session in Europe, which is most of the people involved. I ended up running WA time sessions, which tended to kind of attract people from, I guess, Southeast Asia, Australia, and South Africa, and some very late night working Americans. So that's been going, I think, well, I've been involved since, I think maybe May 2020, and kind of host sessions a couple of times a week. We've sort of implemented all these rules around, I guess, kind of working respectfully and that sort of thing, because the whole kind of premise behind the group was to kind of to be inclusive and to have like a safe space for people who are in kind of minority groups working in academia. And it's quite, although it's not explicitly for any particular kind of person, it's very heavily weighted towards sort of women, trans, non-binary, etc. People. And a lot of people who've been involved have been really like, said that it's kind of the first time they felt like they've had good colleagues in academia, and it's like the best workplace they've ever had. So it's just been like pretty lovely, and it's been great in terms of getting to know people from all around the world as well, and like different research areas, but also kind of overlapping. So
great.
Yeah.
All right.
I might leave it at that, and then I guess.
Yeah. And thank you, Lara. And Dorinda, can you tell us? Well, I'm actually part of Dorinda's writing group, so can you tell us more about this writing group that we've been sharing for almost 2 years now?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about that as Lara was speaking, like when did we start? And I think it's been about 2 years, because I actually started talking about doing a writing group longer than that, but it did take a while to get, the friends and colleagues around to get it going. What was important for me when I set up this writing group is the kind of groups that Lara has been describing. They're kind of more generally known as, the shut up and write sessions, where it's more sitting together, having that time together to support where, okay, now we're going to be quiet and we're going to work, so it's to put that kind of pressure on each other to work. There's quite a number of those available, so that wasn't quite what I wanted and what I felt that the space that I needed. So the writing group that we are running is actually where you get feedback on your writing. So we hand in pieces of writing, and we meet once a month. It's just an hour meeting, not like the whole day as Lara's been describing. But yeah, we get feedback on that writing. It's a different kind of group because, the commitment required is different, rather than just rocking up and doing your own work. You do have to commit to say, yeah, I will read your writing, and we've put rules around the kind of writing, how much writing. So we sort of cap it at 10,000 words, which means that if one person has, if it's one person submitting, then they might submit a whole chapter or a whole article. Whereas if there's two people submitting, then it will be smaller pieces of writing. Because we figure that's about manageable to read 10,000 words and to comment on that. Also to what you can get through in an hour to discuss. And so then when we get together in the meeting, the person who has submitted, they'll give a really brief synopsis of what they were doing and what they were hoping to achieve in their writing. And then we take turns giving feedback, and it's up to the person who submitted to take the notes. What they think is important. So we really put the onus on them. I think that's really, if I just briefly give a good discussion. Okay. If you want to add something, Bernardo, because you're in the group as well. So,
well, I think that it's a great thing for PhD students. I remember joining this group when I was starting with my PhD. So it was about writings with peers, but also starting to know other PhD students. So there was this social component. I think that it was really important for me to start getting to know some of my colleagues, but also starting to writing with others during these sessions. So I actually found it really useful. But now I will ask you some questions. So I specific questions about each of the different type of writing groups. So I want to leave some time for that. So I would like to start asking you, Lara and Dorinda, about the benefits that you find that PhD students that are part of your writing groups, or scholars in general, can find when joining these writing groups. So if you could tell us about pros, benefits that you can find in joining these writing groups that you are part of.
Do you want me to go first? Or?
Yes, Lara, please. Thank you.
I think in terms of, Dorinda mentioned feedback, and I think the feedback in the groups that I've kind of been involved in is more, it's still there, but it's more informal. So with the international one, I think there's kind of a core group of probably like 20, 30 people that I've been kind of consistently involved, and you know, that you'll be in a session and someone will mention that they're working on something that, you know, they don't quite know how to do. And, you know, someone else will say, oh, just send it to me, I'll have a look. So I think over time it has kind of built up into more of like a feedback thing, and people are being quite generous with their time as well. And there's a bit of a mix of not just different fields, but different kind of levels as well. So kind of ranging from, I guess, probably undergraduate students, mostly kind of PhD, postdoc level, and then kind of associate professor level as well. So you kind of get different people giving advice at different levels, and then receiving advice as well. But I think, I guess the main kind of benefits for that one, as well as the other one that I talked about, is probably kind of social and just, I guess, kind of a sense of collegiality that you don't really get a lot in academia these days. And kind of informal advice around career stuff as well, just kind of talking about whatever particular problem you're having, and getting kind of general advice on it. So, you know, I have to respond to this particular reviewer's feedback that's a bit nasty, how should I deal with that? Which I think gets talked about in kind of break times quite a bit with the face-to-face one, but also in the online one as well. And I guess also kind of more like professional networking. I don't really love that word, but as well, people kind of starting to organize conferences together, especially with the international one, looking at kind of applying for grants together, that sort of thing. So the fact that it's kind of online kind of takes away a lot of the difficulties of being in kind of, I guess, lower level academic or precarious like positions as PhD student or postdoc, where you know, have difficulty traveling, and, you know, if you're in Australia, it's hard to get the money together to go anywhere. So the kind of online component, combined with, I guess, COVID and everyone else wanting to do online, has been really good, I think, in those terms, getting people to actually collaborate with each other in meaningful ways across the world, which is nice. I'm also going to send a link to this group. I don't like spruiking things, but I think it's worth spruiking.
Great. Thank you, Lara.
Yeah. You want me to go now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I really agree with what Lara's been saying as well about that whole thing of building community, because I think doing your PhD, and like, yeah, we have Alice here who's just new, right? And finding that it's different work environment doing a PhD as opposed to working, right? And I think that it can be lonely. It can be a lonely journey. You know, you're stuck in your office by yourself doing your thing in your field, you know, so I think it's really important to get that community around you. And then when you do, you know, fall in a hole for some reason, you got others that you can talk to, and it can help you get out of it. But another thing that what really inspired me to really pursue setting up a writing group is right at the beginning of my candidature, I went to a writing workshop, I suppose, from Hugh Kearns. He, if you want to follow him on Twitter, he has a website called I Think Well, and I think his Twitter handle is also I Think Well. I'm quite sure that's what it's called. Anyway, and what really struck me at the time when he was talking about writing, he said, if you're sitting there by yourself and you do your writing and you edit and you polish and you polish and you polish, he says you can still only by yourself get it to about 80%. Whereas when, you know, to publish, you need more than that. And so he said, when you get it to that 80%, you have to give it to other people to look at and give you feedback. Otherwise, you're just not really going to get it past the 80%. So I guess that stuck with me. And then another thing which stuck with me, and I think this was actually earlier during my undergrad, one of the lecturers was saying that if you think of who you can get peer, not just peer, who you can get feedback from, is like, you know, you've got yourself and you'll do the most of the work, but then you've also got your peers around you, and you should use them to get feedback. But then above that, you know, you've got your supervisors, but your supervisor is only one person, and well, two. You've probably got two supervisors, and obviously their time is limited, you know, so you can't be going to them all the time to get that feedback. And so you've really got to build that community around you to get that feedback from. So I guess those were the two things that really really pushed me to say, no, I really want to get this writing group running. And I think for both of those reasons, it's been really beneficial to me. Both of those points. Another thing which I've really enjoyed about the writing group is that we tend to think that writing is this thing that happens. You sit at your computer and you write. And I think that by having a writing group and being able to discuss, and it doesn't have to be a group like mine, you can have these discussions in what Lara's been describing as well. But just to actually sort of explicate the process of writing. So just thinking about, how do you plan this? How do you actually execute it and write it? What are the blocks? What are the hindrances? How do you get over it? And it just helps you really think through the craft, how you're actually doing it in the process. And I guess those 3 points I've really really enjoyed and benefited from in the writing group.
Great, thank you, Dorinda. I would like just to share 2 more benefits in regards to your group, Dorinda, that are kind of related, but that I found great. The first one has to do with this brainstorming that we were doing in each of our sessions. So we were having a participant, a member of the writing group, sharing a piece of writing like 1 week before, and then on the day we were giving them feedback. But apart from the written feedback that we were giving, and I'll ask you a question later on about feedback, but it was about this kind of philosophical brainstorming that we were doing around each of the pieces of writing. I mean, because we sometimes get with that with our supervisors, but sometimes we don't get that discussions. So I think that having as part of the feedback, discussing some different pieces of writing that we were sharing was really useful, because sometimes we were opening some questions that were taking our writing somewhere else. Definitely. And I found that kind of flexible, open brainstorming that we still do in our sessions, I find it very useful. But also, and in regards to the social part of that we've been highlighting about the writing groups, as I was saying before, when I started my PhD, I was like all of us, like very isolated. I mean, I wanted to know to meet other PhD students, and also this writing group was really useful just to ask questions about everything that has to do with the writing of our thesis, in terms of the logistics of the university, where we have to go if we need to this or that, because we were getting advice. I mean, we were giving advice to each of us all the time during these writing sessions. So that was for me a moment where I was bombarding you with questions about how things need to be done, but it was a way of networking, was a way of socializing with others. So I found this writing group really supportive in that way as well. So that was
definitely, that's right.
Benefit.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the challenges of writing groups. Things that you find difficult in running the writing groups, or just obstacles that you find that are important to highlight, in case anyone here wants to run a writing group or wants to join a writing group and wants to improve these groups as part of to continue writing the thesis. So Lara, can you think of any challenges or obstacles you find on the way of organizing and running these writing groups?
Lack of institutional support would stick out.
Okay.
I guess the reason that writing groups are probably so popular as well is because of lack of institutional support, because like was sort of alluded to before, supervisors' time are limited, and that is because they don't have much workloads to dedicate to HDR students.
Definitely.
And stuff kind of gets squeezed more and more, so people need to find sort of their own ways of getting support, and often that involves free labor, which is problematic, but also the alternative, I think, is worse. So I feel kind of ambivalent about it as well. In terms of funding, we actually tried to get some funding for the international writing group, the online one that we mentioned, just to basically kind of have kind of, because it's gotten very big. It's, I think last time I checked, it was about 2,000 people kind of involved. And it's not just sort of the actual writing groups, but there's also kind of this massive Facebook group where people kind of ask a lot of questions and give feedback, and it's all moderated and stuff. So we tried to get some funding just to kind of support the admin side, and also to pay people who are kind of not in great employment positions to do some hosting every now and then, not kind of people in permanent positions, but or in kind of decent fixed term ones, but just to have some kind of financial reward for all the effort that people have been putting in.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. So
Okay.
that was like very, very competitive funding process. And it's not something that's kind of easily fundable as well, because there's not really schemes to fund this kind of stuff beyond kind of institutional support, I guess. So yeah, the kind of time effort, I guess, is probably the main challenge. I would say with the kind of face-to-face writing group, the time is actually pretty limited in terms of organization, just really booking a room, sending out an email to people who are interested, hoping they turn up. And, you know, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And other than that, it's all like the organization pretty much does itself, buying a bit of food, basically, to lure people in.
Tim Tams, right? The
Yeah.
chocolate to get us going.
I have to say, Laura, who is the one who co-runs it with me, is much better at providing food than I am. So there's that, and then there's also, I guess, the critical kind of mass of people, and I think that varies depending on institutional support. So as our current institution, the University of Western Australia, has made more and more people redundant, the number of people coming to the writing group has increased quite a lot, because people kind of feel a need for, I guess, kind of support from colleagues, and also, you know, PhD students who are like missing supervisors and that kind of stuff. So I think having kind of enough people that want to come along and are sort of feeling a need to engage in this kind of work because of whatever conditions they're in their professional environment, makes a difference in terms of participation. And I've noticed that with the other international group as well, with kind of waves of COVID and lockdowns, there's more and more people, and then there's less, and, you know, or even like summer and winter, when people kind of go on holidays, then they disappear for a while and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Lara. And Dorinda, did we find any challenging?
Well, I do believe so. You might disagree, but I believe we've had some challenges. I'd identify two. One which was, you know, it's just some things that had happened, and the way it kind of happened, because, you know, as you set it up, you know, you tended to get people who were sort of at the same level of candidature as myself, and then what happened we all ended up being in our second year of our candidature at the same time, and so we're all doing interviews, field work, that sort of work at the same time, and as a result, it was really difficult to keep the group going during that time. And like I say, you know, no fault of anybody, because, you know, we all know that when you're doing field work, you've got to be responsive. So if you need to set up an interview, you've got to do an interview. And also because we were all in that stage, it was, we were all doing less writing to share. And that was just a thing that happened. So I guess learning from that, I felt that you're probably best off, if you're going to have a writing group, of trying to get a bit of a mix of levels of, not levels, stages of candidature, or, you know, even beyond postdocs or whatever, because that would keep the group running through those periods when others are off doing field work. So that was one challenge that we encountered. The other one I found is that you tended to get this thing of people who say, yeah, they're really keen to come, but then they don't come and they don't join in. And then eventually it gets to this embarrassing stage where they don't want to come because they've never contributed. And yet they're also the people who, you know, are kind of in danger of having difficulty in their journey, their candidature journey, because of lack of support. And so just trying to navigate this and working out, at what point do you say, okay, fine, you know, leave it, I won't badger you anymore. And at what point do you really, really encourage somebody to come. And, our group is a really friendly space. It's a really comfortable, lovely space. So just trying to get people to come and experience that, so that when they want to submit, they are confident to submit, because submitting is actually a bit of a scary thing. You got to learn to do it. And you also, and that actually, coming back to benefits, has been another benefit of the group, that you are forced to get over yourself and say, this is my writing. Would you like to read it? Can you please read it and give me feedback? Because it's actually really scary, and you really got to learn that as you progress through your candidate journey, that this is the point of doing a PhD. You write, you have an opinion, you need to share that opinion. Otherwise, really, there's not a point. So, but yeah, so then there's people that you would benefit and have expressed interest, but then there's this, it's like this hurdle, and I haven't worked out a solution, I suppose, to get people over that hurdle. Yeah.
I would like to add two more challenges to the ones you mentioned before. One is related to one that Lara mentioned before, because we are presenting today different type of writing groups. Our writing group, Dorinda, is one that is organized by PhD students, and is more like a kind of support group that study from PhD students starting to write a PhD thesis. And something that we've been lacking is institutional support. I mean, when I think about why the university is not supporting these writing groups, they are so good. I mean, if the university would be running and promoting this writing group in each different school or disciplines, it would be so good for those that are, for everyone, but for those that are starting their PhDs in especially for them. And in saying that, I found that was a difficulty, and it especially when we went through COVID-19, because as you were saying, we were all in different stages and numbers went down. We were having some sessions, we were probably just 3 of us. But then saying that, I mean, the first one, institutional support, that was a main challenge, but the other one has to do with, COVID-19 and number of members in the group. But I think that something that went very well is turning this thing online, because including myself in that process, I had a new member in the family, a baby. So it was really hard for me to attend the sessions face-to-face in some circumstances. So going online was an opportunity that actually, I think that went very well, because we had a few sessions, hybrid sessions, face-to-face, and some online sessions at the same time, and we were able to keep a number of participants. So I think that for those that are willing to think of organizing a writing group, or for those that are writing a face-to-face writing group, doing a hybrid session it's not a big deal. It's just having a laptop there and trying to make those online participate in the discussion was really, really good.
Definitely. And that's what we've been doing now, like even, post-COVID. So it's kind of like giving people the option. If it's easier for them to join online, it works. Like Bernardo says, it works quite well. And
from what Lara you were saying before, 2,000 participants. I know it's an international one. You probably have multiple organizations that are promoting these writing groups, but going online as well, I mean, apart from face-to-face, I think it's a way of engaging more people, especially those that live far away from the university or they cannot make it. So because it's super easy, and then having more participants is really good for the writing. I found it really important. So those are my two challenges and some opportunities too. And this third question I wanted to ask you is about feedback, because it's something really important, and we are all looking for some feedback when we join this writing group. So I would like to start with you, Lara, because you presented two different type of writing groups, one that's online with 2,000 members. So I'm very interested in knowing how is the process of giving feedback in these two different type of writing groups.
I mean, there's not huge amounts of kind of formal feedback. So it's more general kind of discussion. Someone will say, I'm having a problem with this in the break, and then everyone will kind of chime in with their own experiences and advice and that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily written feedback or anything like that. I should have said before, I actually was involved in like a similar group to the one that you guys are running right now. At UWA, there was kind of a large number of postgrads at the time, and I think maybe like 4 or 5 of us were like very keen to kind of get stuff going. So we were running kind of similar like writing feedback groups, and also organizing like social things, and more like themed discussions. Like, so we'd have something on class and co-opt some one of the people who worked in the department to kind of buddy up with a postgrad who was, say, studying that particular area. We'd have set a couple of readings and have like a proper discussion. It was very time intensive, but I think it was good for getting people to stick around, this kind of social element as well, because there was less of the guilt of not having participated, like you're talking about. And yeah, there we had kind of similar problems with feedback and people, not wanting to be involved when they hadn't given feedback on someone else's work. It felt strange about asking for feedback on their own work. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I have a huge amount to say about feedback in terms of like actual concrete feedback for the ones that I've been involved in. I guess the international one, a lot of the feedback as well has been around just people posting to that Facebook group and asking for, I don't know, say, I want to apply for a postdoc in France. Can someone kind of tell me what the options are? And then a bunch of people reply and give advice. Or like someone saying, I'm putting in for this particular grant. I don't really understand how to answer this question. And people offer to send their own grant applications that have been successful. So yeah, that kind of element of feedback, but less probably the, this is exactly how you should edit this document kind of feedback.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Lara. And Dorinda.
Yeah, so we've actually formalized our process of feedback a bit more. So we have we call it a form. It's basically just say 3 or 4 questions, which we ask everyone that submits to actually fill out this form. And it's just to give the rest of the members of the writing group information on, like, where are you actually at with this writing? Because the thing is that if you're expecting like a polished end product and then you get this, which is actually a first draft, there's a mismatch. So just so that it's really clear to all the members of the writing group who are going to read the writing, where actually is this at? Like, so if it's outlined and there's still dots and there's paragraphs, we know that, and so we're not, and then it affects the kind of feedback that we give back. Another question on that form is what kind of feedback are you actually looking for? So the purpose of this document is really to, one, it makes you reflective of your own writing. So it gets you to think about how you went about it, what worked, what didn't, what do you like about the piece of writing that you've got? What do you think you've nailed and what do you think you need help with? So it really puts you in control. What I actually like about it for myself as well is that I found that it has taken a bit of the fear out of getting feedback, because if somebody says, oh, this paragraph is actually really messy, I've probably identified that myself already. And then as a result, it takes the harshness out of the critique, out of the feedback, because you kind of have identified it yourself already. So I think that it helps with that process. It's also a process which I've adopted into with my supervisors as well. So when I give them a chapter, I also just give them just a very brief, half a page thing of what I think of it and what I'm really looking for. What kind of advice am I looking for? Where have I struggled with this? And I think that putting the writer in control of what they are looking for, I think has been really helpful in that process of feedback. Because at the end of the day, getting feedback is, like I said before, it's pretty scary. You are putting yourself out there. And I guess we've really tried to, as much as possible, and consciously tried to make it a safe space, our writing group a safe space. And another thing which the form does as well is it prevents what probably got this term from Hugh Kearns as well. What he calls, I think, is crop dusting. So if you give a chapter to people, whether it's in your writing group or whether it's your supervisors, and it's just this blank, well, no, it's not obviously not a blank document, but they don't really know what you're looking for. The tendency is then just to pick on everything, put red marks all over it, comments left, right, and center, and it's what he calls crop dusting. So as a result, it's not targeted. It's not necessarily what you're looking for. You get overwhelmed because you get this document back, which has got red marks and comments all over it, and you think you've done a terrible job. So it prevents those problems. And I actually really like this term of like, okay, so if you're giving feedback to a document, don't just crop dust and just, comment on everything, but think about what they are looking for. And that's where the feedback form comes in as well. What are they looking for? And try to address their concerns and their problems. Obviously, if there's something glaring that they haven't picked up and noticed, obviously you're free to say so, and I have that with my supervisors. I have that in the writing group as well. People do feel free to say what they think about it, but it just, it takes the harshness out of the critique, puts the writer in the good perspective to receive the critique, and it gives it a little bit of structure, which I think has been really helpful.
Yeah. And what I love about the writing group is that besides the form that we send to all the members, and besides the writing feedback that we provide on the day, we put the piece of writing on a big screen, and each of us start going section by section, making comments. And this generates a discussion and the brainstorming I was talking about before, with questions and thinking of how to restructure things in a different way. And as someone giving feedback is great because you really get involved with that piece of writing on the day, but also as someone receiving that feedback, it's like, wow, you start receiving a lot of questions that actually sometimes take you to somewhere else, to add another paragraph, to add another chapter, to add, and so that discussion as part of providing feedback, I find it really, really useful. And this takes me to the last question that has to do with how to set up a writing group and all the steps that you think that are important in starting a successful writing groups, especially for those that are willing to start one or joining one. So Lara, if you can tell us just some tips to write a successful writing group.
Well, I didn't form either of the groups, but I think for the kind of face-to-face one, actually no, I did, I guess, help form the postgrad one that I mentioned earlier. But for the face-to-face one, I think the steps are pretty minimal, just making sure you had enough people who wanted to be involved, and kind of a solid mailing list that you could send things to, and a space, bit of money for food, and just a structure that you thought would work, and then just kind of freedom to adjust it if it's not working or you need to change things up by going online, that kind of stuff. The other one was, I think, a lot more complicated. I wasn't there from the very beginning with the international one, but I was there quite early compared to most people. And I think because of the size of the group, getting it to work in a way that wasn't really, really time intensive for some people was quite hard, especially once the kind of Facebook group element of it took off, because people were kind of constantly posting stuff. And then because it's such a huge group, you kind of get more like hostile responses to things that, you know, someone needs to deal with, but, oh, it's the middle of the night, everyone's asleep. And also people don't want to be like moderating Facebook groups for free constantly throughout their day. So I think it was a big kind of laboured issue with a few people in particular who were there from the very beginning.